Rambam. We continue learning the laws of Maicholos Asurais, laws of kosher, that which is forbidden foods is our focus. L'chaim. We begin chapter 8, but we're gonna do chapter 9 because it's a more relevant laws. Chapter 9. Chapter 8 is about the sciatic nerve, actually, from on the animal that you have to take out, right? But this is the laws of basar v'cholav, of milk and meat. Okay, halacha number 1. It is forbidden to cook meat and milk together and to partake of them according to scriptural law. It is forbidden to benefit from such a mixture. It must be buried. Its ashes are forbidden, like the ashes of all substances that must be buried. So you can't have any pleasure. It says 3 times in the Torah, do not cook a mother's kid and its milk. I think we're going to go through here, if I recall, all those kind of details of what that means in the verse. But it says 3 times: 1 not to cook, 1 not to eat, 1 not to have benefit. Those are the 3 things, right? So here it tells us can't have benefit from it. You have to bury it. That's unique to milk and meat, by the way. We learned before about a nevela. A nevela was an animal that you found in the field that was killed by another animal, right? Kosher animal. Can't eat it. Or an animal that you slaughtered and you didn't slaughter properly. That's also called a nevela. Or you slaughtered it properly, but you found from its, from the cow's lungs, let's say, that it was unhealthy and it wouldn't last the year. It wouldn't live out the year. So that's called a treifa. And that's also something. But you can have benefit from those things. You could sell it to a non-Jew, right? Or you could give it to your dog. The meat, you could give that meat to the dog. You can benefit from it. Jew can't eat it, but you can benefit. Milk and meat, you can't even have benefit from it. All right? If there was some milk in here and some meat that were cooked together, I can't, give it to somebody else who's not Jewish, who doesn't have to follow these laws, that they can enjoy it. I can't even give it away. I have to bury it. Okay? Unique law.
It's the verse that asks us to do.
Lo yisavashel gedi b'chalei v'mai. Lo yisavashel, don't cook gedi, a young, right? Here, let's continue. Whenever a person cooks an olive-sized portion of the 2 substances together, milk and meat, he is worthy of lashes. As the verse says, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Similarly, a person who partakes of an olive-sized portion of the meat and milk that were cooked together is worthy of lashes, even though he was not the one who cooked them. So there's the one who cooked them gets lashes. Let's say another guy eats it. Another Jew eats it. He didn't cook it. He also gets lashes, right? The Torah remains silent concerning the prohibition against partaking of meat and milk only because it forbade cooking them. Right? As it didn't say don't eat it, it says don't cook it. Why did it remain silent? This is as if to say that even cooking it is forbidden, how much more so is cooking of it. Right? Everything else, when it spoke about a nevela or a treifa, what did it say? What did the Torah tell us? Don't eat it. Don't partake in it. Don't eat it. Didn't say don't cook. It said don't eat it. Cooking you could. Cooking you could. So a religious Jew could work in a non-kosher restaurant, theoretically, if they didn't do milk and meat. But they almost always do milk and meat together, right? Cooking it. So you can't. Because you can't do that, right? But let's say you didn't. If there wasn't, it was just a hot dog stand, right? You're just, on the corner hot dog stand. Now, not a good idea. It's only to non-Jews you could sell it. You can't sell it to a Jew, right? You can't do. But theoretically, you could work in such a kitchen because you can have the benefit of it. You just can't partake in it because the Torah only said don't eat it. You could sell it, you could cook it, but here it said don't cook it. Well, if you can't cook it, obviously you can't eat it. That's why the Torah tells us. Okay. That's how our sages understand. To cite the parallel, the Torah did not mention the prohibition against relations with one's daughter because it forbade those with one's daughter of a daughter, right? So the granddaughter you can't have relations with, obviously the daughter you can't. Your daughter, right? Is that clear? Yeah. I have to excuse me. I have to move my legs for a moment. I've sat for a long time. Give me a second. Move my legs. Actually. Fine. According to scriptural law, the prohibition involves only a mixture of meat from a kosher domesticated animal and milk from a kosher domesticated animal. As implied by the verse, do not cook a kid, which is kosher, and its mother's milk, which is kosher, right? The term kid includes here offspring of an ox, offspring of a sheep, and offspring of a goat, unless the verse states explicitly a goat kid. Well, a kid means here a young animal. It doesn't mean a goat kid, because the word goat kid is not gidi. It's az gidi. So it doesn't mean like people want to say that it means only a goat. It doesn't mean a goat. It means a kid. Kid meaning young. So you have a young bull, a young ox, right? And you have a young sheep, and you have young, right? It means kosher though. Right? So the term a kid in its mother's milk does not exclude all other situations. As the Torah is speaking regarding the commonplace circumstance. I mean, the intent is not that one is liable only with cooking the offspring in the milk of its mother and not in any other situation, right? Follow? Some people want to say, oh, kosher, I keep kosher. I have, I have milk from a mature cow that I have with my steak. From my mature cow, not from a calf, right? No. The Torah is speaking in common circumstance. And why that's common, I'm not certain, but that's what Rambam is saying. With regard to meat of a kosher animal, which was cooked in the milk of a non-kosher animal, or meat of a non-kosher animal that was cooked in the milk of a kosher animal, by contrast, cooking is permitted and deriving benefit is permitted. One is not liable for transgressing the prohibition against partaking of milk if one partakes of it. Right. In other words, you will be transgressing eating non-kosher. It's non-kosher. You're not allowed to eat that, but you could cook it. That's the point. So that's interesting. So
the last sentence has me a bit baffled. One is not liable for meat and milk if one partakes of it, or for transgression of the prohibition.
For the transgression of milk and meat, the transgression of eating something not kosher, yes. There's different transgressions, right? The transgression of milk and meat you don't transgress because it wasn't kosher, one of them, from a kosher source. Kosher source, right?
So when it says partakes of it, partakes there.
Eat it, you ate it. Or cooked it, I guess, even. Yeah, one's not live for partaking, and all the more so. No, because you could cook it, and you could
benefit from it by
you can benefit, and you could cook it, right? You can't and partaking of it, you will not transgress the prohibition of milk and meat. You'll transgress eating a nevela or a non-kosher animal. That's a different transgression, but not this transgression.
Because what I want to clarify is that when it says partake, does it imply eating as well?
Eating,
Or
yeah. 1 second. Yeah, and partake, it means eating. In the Hebrew, it's actually alachilosoi, on its eating. I don't know if it says partake. It just says clearly, you're not transgressing. You're not liable for milk and meat if you eat it, because it's not coming from a kosher source. They both have to come from a kosher source. They have to be a kosher animal, or right? Both the milk and the meat, where it's coming from, right?
The thing is, how could you partake of a product that is from a non-kosher animal?
So we just said, but you're not transgressing milk and meat. You're transgressing another transgression. You have to read the words. You have to be very particular in what he's saying. He's saying you're not transgressing that transgression, but obviously you can't have it, right? You can't, right? You can't eat it because it's a transgression of non-kosher milk or non-kosher meat.
Right. I just want to
No, I'm saying that's why I say you have to be very exacting in the words. And sometimes I'll tell you the truth, in the English, it's not as clear as in the Hebrew.
And that is the point, because there's so many nuances with the English language. It implies certain things, and the implication may not necessarily be fact. So I just wanted to make sure.
Number 4. Similarly, the meat of a wild beast, right, and the meat of a fowl, together with the milk of a wild beast and the milk of a domesticated animal, is forbidden according to scriptural law. It's not forbidden. I'm sorry, not forbidden. Yeah. When I was reading and saying that, I was saying, well, what's that saying? Right, because the verse is speaking about a domesticated animal. Yedi, right, young domesticated animal, ox, goat, sheep, right? That's what it's speaking about, but not a wild beast like deer is kosher, but it's a wild animal. It's not domesticated, right? Right. So that's not included, that meat.
Interesting.
Or chicken is not gedi, because there's no category of a gedi in the wild animal. That term gedi is not for a wild animal, it's a domesticated animal, and it doesn't apply to fowl, right? So therefore, if you had milk and meat in that respect, it's not scriptural law, right? It is only rabbinic law. Well, as we'll see. Therefore, it's permitted to cook it, and it is permitted to benefit from it. It's forbidden to partake of it according to rabbinic law, so the people at large will not be neglect and come to violate the scriptural prohibition against milk and meat, and partake of the meat of a kosher domesticated animal cooked in the milk of a kosher domesticated animal. For the literal meaning of the verse implies only meat of the kid in the milk of its actual mother. Therefore, they forbade all meat and milk. The rabbis did, but not scripture, right? But you could sell it, you could benefit from it, and you could even cook it, right? You could cook it, you just can't eat from it, right? Now, obviously, you got to be careful with that, right? And obviously, when would you cook it? That would be, again, in a restaurant, if you're working in a non-kosher restaurant. But the problem is that, if you're a chef and you're going to work in a non-kosher restaurant, most likely you're going to have meat from a domesticated kosher animal. It wasn't slaughtered right properly, so it's not kosher. But that's not the point over here. The point is, even if it's not slaughtered, but it came from a domesticated kosher animal, that you can't have with milk from a cow, even, right? Those two things together, even, again, it wasn't slaughtered properly. It's not about the slaughtering. It's about the source of it being a domesticated kosher source. That's the point. Again, very nuanced everything, right?
Okay, no, I know this, the question I'm going to ask is not necessarily directly related to, because I'm dealing with cheeses, where there are cheeses that are made from, non-meat sources.
You mean they're
Artificial.
rennet, the
Right.
rennet.
Right.
We'll be talking about that. I don't know if
Okay.
it's here, might be here. I don't remember now. But yeah, we spoke about it already. We already learned about the cheeses. And Shabbos, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm referring to like, I mean, is the appearance of eating something that is like, for instance, lasagna. You know, the non-Jews make lasagna with cheese and meat. But if they use that cheese, they don't put the rabbit in it.
First of all, so that's milk and meat.
But what
If
about,
they're using chopped meat comes from a cow, right? If it was horse meat,
but if it's like,
if it was horse meat, then if it was horse meat, so then you could cook it, you just and sell it, but you can't eat it because it's horse meat, right? Number 5, it's permitted to partake of fish and locusts cooked in milk. Okay. When a person slaughters a fowl and finds eggs that are completed within it, it's permitted to partake of them together with milk. Right? That's not considered, right? We eat eggs and we can put cheese in it and put milk in it, right? Eggs come from fowl, right? It's not foul to eat milk with it, right? Pun intended. When milk and meat are smoked, cooked in a hot springs of Tiberias or the like, one is not liable for lashes. In other words, you're not allowed to do it. Nevertheless, it's a prohibition against partaking in these mixtures, right? But in other words, it's not the biblical law that if you transgress, you get lashes for such a prohibition, right? Because you did an action, that's something you can't take back, and therefore you get lashes. Similarly, when meat is cooked in a way, milk from a dead animal, or milk from a male, or blood, or if blood is cooked with milk, one is absolved and is not liable for partaking of the mixture because the prohibition against partaking of milk and meat. Right. You're not allowed to do that. But you're not liable. When, however, a person cooks the meat of a dead animal, forbidden fat, or the like in milk, so even fat, right? Because fat comes from the from an animal. So we're talking about a dead animal, right? He is liable for lashes for cooking. Others, we're talking about just cooking it, not eating it, right? Because the question of cooking means milk and meat. Is that called milk and meat? It's a dead animal. Yes. He's not liable for lashes for partaking of the mixture because of prohibition against meat and milk. For the why? He is, however, liable for partaking of the vela, forbidden fat. Yeah, but he is liable for the forbidden fat. For the prohibition against mixtures of meat and milk does not take effect with regard to the entities prohibited as nevela or forbidden fat, because we are not speaking about a more encompassing prohibition, a prohibition which adds a new dimension of the two prohibitions that take effect at the same time. That was a little nuance over here, but I'll just explain. There is nothing that you added here in the when two prohibitions come together. So you have a prohibition of that it's a non-kosher, right? It's a nevela, right? It's an animal that was on slaughter. So therefore you're not allowed to eat it. the fact that there's milk and meat here together didn't add something to it. There's nothing new that it added. Therefore, it doesn't, if it adds a new dimension, so therefore it becomes two prohibitions. But if it's a prohibition already exists there, and now it didn't come at the same time, the prohibition, right? The prohibition of milk and meat only came, you already started off with the fact that it was non-kosher pizza meat, because it died. It wasn't slaughtered. So you already started off with that reality that it wasn't. Now you want to add to it milk and meat? No, because there's no new dimension that you added. So therefore it's not, and it didn't take place, and it didn't come at the same time or come at the same time. Therefore, it's not added. Which would mean that you wouldn't get two, you would get, if it was added, then you would have two prohibitions, you'd be crossing. That means you could get 2 times lashes, right? So you won't. Is that clear? If it's not, next year we'll come back and learn it again. When a person cooks a fetus in milk, is liable. Similarly, one, right? Because the fetus, right? You slaughtered the animal, and now came out there was a fetus inside there. That's still, right? Fetus of the animal, right? The cow had a fetus inside there. You slaughtered the cow, took out the fetus. Now you cooked it with milk. You're liable. Similarly, one who partakes of it is liable, meaning eats it. When, however, one cooks a placenta, skin, sinews, bones, and the roots of the horns, the soft portion of the hoofs cooked in milk, not liable. Why? Because that's not meat of the animal. Right? It's not the essence of the animal. Not the placenta, not the skin, not the sinews, not the bones. Bones without meat. Obviously, the meat on the bones, that's a different story. So you're not liable. Are you allowed to do it? No. Liable means what? What is right? In this instance, lashes. Right. When would you get lashes? 2 witnesses warn you not to do this, and you did it anyways. Okay? That's when you would get lashes. Otherwise, if you did it without those witnesses, it's a prohibition. You went against God, but there won't be a consequence of a punishment. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. If you did it inadvertently, you did it accidentally, what do you have to do? Huh? What do you have to do? Do you get lashes if you did it inadvertently?
Oh, no.
No, what do? You ate milk and meat inadvertently. You have to bring a sacrifice. To sin, it's still a sin, right? So like poison, if you inadvertently ate poison, it has an effect, right? Can't say I didn't mean to. It has an effect. So inadvertently you ate something that's not kosher, has an effect. And in order to gain atonement, cleansing, you have to bring an offering. So anyone who partakes of the mixture, such a mixture is not liable. The cooking of it or eating of it. Again, liable means, there is the consequence, but it's still prohibited. When meat falls into milk, or milk falls into meat, and they're cooked together, the minimum measure for which one is liable, enough for one substance to be impart its flavor to the other. Oh, this is a famous halacha, right? What does imply? So follow this. Interesting, right? Right here, you had a cup of milk over here. You see my cup of milk? And now some gravy or whatever of a meat fell into here. Is it kosher or not kosher? So it has to impart its flavor. So what does that mean? When a piece of meat falls into a bubbling pot of milk, full of milk, pot full of milk, a non-Jew should taste the contents of the pot because a non-Jew is allowed to eat meat and milk rather, right? If it has a flavor of meat, it is forbidden. If not, it is permitted. But the piece of meat is forbidden, and that has to be buried, right? In other words, it's only forbidden or liable is it has an impact. When does the above apply? When he hurried and removed the piece of meat before it discharged the milk that it absorbed. If, however, if you did not remove it quickly, we require 60 times its volume. And that's how the lacha we do. Because the milk that it absorbed became forbidden. And it was discharged and then mixed together with the remainder of the milk. 1 second. Let's see the commentary here. So if there's 60 times more milk, right, than the piece of meat that fell in, then it becomes nullified, the impact of the meat in the milk. Okay? When milk falls into a piece of meat being cooked in a pot, we taste the piece of which the milk fell. So now its milk fell into meat, right? If it does not have the flavor of milk, everything is permitted. In the meat, right? So again, we taste, it says over here, and Anju has to taste it, right? Because maybe it did have an impact. More stringent rules apply if the piece of meat has a flavor of milk, even though the piece of meat was pressed to remove the absorbed liquid, the flavor of milk would not retain. Since it has the flavor of milk now, it is forbidden and we must measure its volume. If everything in the pot, the other meat and the vegetables, the sauce and the spices is great enough so that the piece of 1/60th of the entire volume, piece of meat, is forbidden and the remainder are permitted. So you have over here a pot of a stew, right? Milk fell and it fell on the meat, right? And it became absorbed. Now you need 60 times more that piece of meat in the pot of stew, that the pot of stew would be kosher, right? That piece of meat, though, isn't, because the milk fell on it in this instance. Is that clear? When does the above apply? When he did not stir the pot at the outset when the milk fell into it. He did so only at the end and did not cover the pot, right? If, however, he stirred the pot from the beginning until the end, or covered the pot from the time the milk fell into until the end, the question is whether the prohibition exists depends on whether the milk imparted its flavor. So now the whole thing needs to be tasted. Similarly, the milk fell into the sauce or onto all the pieces, as not known on which piece the milk fell. You should stir the entire pot so the contents will be mixed thoroughly. If the flavor of the milk can be detected in the entire pot, it is forbidden. If not, it is permitted. If a non-Jew Gentile to taste the pot, who can rely on, cannot be found, we require the measure of 60, whether for meat or milk and meat. If there's one measure of 60, it is permitted. If there is less than 60, it is forbidden. If meat has been cooked in a pot, milk should not be cooked in it. If one cooked milk in it, it is forbidden if it imparted its flavor. So you have a meat pot, right? Don't cook milk in here at another time, right? Because the walls of the have meat in it. If you did cook milk in it, right? It's forbidden if it imparted its flavor. So Ashkenazi custom, interesting, is that we do not rely on the non-Jew, but we have to go by 60 times the volume of the pot. So here, let's say this is a meat pot and milk fell in here, cooked in here. So it would have to be 60 times the pot, which generally wouldn't be the case unless it was like a drop, right? Then it would be forbidden in most instances. But this is a meat pot. I cooked milk, someone cooked milk in here, right? Cooked milk in here. This pot will be forbidden. It needs to be kosher.
Okay, but what if, okay,
What are you asking?
if you had milk and meat fell into it, but you had enough milk so it becomes 60 times.
No, you can't do that. You can't. Well, I think he's going to say this. No, he's not going to say it. Not now. Okay. I have to stop over here. I would love to continue, but I
Thank you.
can't. All right. Thank you.